The UN Security Council on Saturday unanimously approved tough new sanctions on North Korea, including an estimated $1 billion export ban, a huge bite out of its total exports of $3 billion. The UN Security Council on Saturday unanimously approved tough new sanctions on North Korea, including an estimated $1 billion export ban, a huge bite out of its total exports, valued at $3 billion last year. The U.S. drafted measure, negotiated with North Korea's neighbor and ally China, is aimed at increasing economic pressure on Pyongyang to return to negotiations on its nuclear and missile programs. President Donald Trump praised the new sanctions on Saturday afternoon, tweeting, "The United Nations Security Council just voted 15-0 to sanction North Korea. China and Russia voted with us. Very big financial impact." United Nations resolution is the single largest economic sanctions package ever on North Korea. Over $1 billion in cost to NK. http:// Daily Mail. UK//pics/22/42F40400005784,764,178 Image A10_1501969654907 JPG. The tough sanction bans North Korean exports of coal, iron ore, lead and seafood, together worth an estimated $1 billion. President Donald Trump praised the UN Security Council for deciding to sanction North Korea on Saturday afternoon. The tough new sanctions on North Korea included an estimated $1 billion export ban, a huge bite out of its total exports, which was valued at $3 billion last year. UK Ambassador to the United Nations Matthew Rickcroft, left, and US Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley vote in favor of new economic sanctions against North Korea on Saturday. The sanction also prohibits countries from increasing the current numbers of North Korean laborers working abroad, bans new joint ventures with North Korea and any new investment in current joint ventures. The United States negotiated with China for a month on the latest resolution, before expanding negotiations to the full 15-member council on Friday. U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley called the resolution the single largest economic sanctions package ever leveled against the North Korean regime and the most stringent set of sanctions on any country in a generation. But she warned that it is not enough and we should not fool ourselves into thinking we have solved the problem, not even close. The threat of an outlaw nuclearized North Korean dictatorship remains, and is rapidly growing more dangerous, Haley told council members after the vote. Trump's administration has been frustrated that China has not done more to rein in North Korea. Washington has threatened to exert trade pressure on Beijing and impose sanctions on Chinese firms doing business with Pyongyang. The Security Council has already imposed 6 rounds of sanctions that have failed to halt North Korea's drive to improve its ballistic missile and nuclear weapons capabilities. The new sanctions come in response to North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's right to long-range missile tests in July. http:// Daily Mail. UK/I/Pix/2017/08/05/22/42 EVA 100005784,764,178 Image A12_15019702800908 JPG. The resolution's adoption follows North Korea's first successful tests of intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching the United States on July 3 and July 27. All of this ICBM and nuclear irresponsibility has to stop, Haley told reporters as she headed to the council to vote. The resolution condemns the launches in the strongest terms and reiterates previous calls for North Korea to suspend all ballistic missile launches and abandon its nuclear weapons and nuclear program in a complete, verifiable and irreversible manner. http:// Daily Mail UK/1/27/08/05/23/1083039464178 the_United_Nations_Security_on_Council_Rise-a-13_1501970867478 JPG. It also adds 9 North Koreans, mainly officials or representatives of companies and banks, to the UN sanctions blacklist, banning their travel and freezing their assets. It also imposes an asset freeze on 2 companies and 2 banks. A Security Council diplomat, who was not authorized to speak publicly and insisted on anonymity, called the newly sanctioned Foreign Trade Bank a very critical clearinghouse for foreign exchange. The United Nations Security Council voted on a new sanctions resolution against North Korea. Russian ambassador to the United Nations Vasily Nebenzov votes on the sanctions. Some feared tensions between the US and Russia would derail the vote, but it went ahead. The Mansuti Overseas Project group of companies, which was also added to the blacklist, is described in the resolution as engaged in exporting workers for construction, including of monuments, in Africa and Southeast Asia. The resolution asks the Security Council Committee monitoring sanctions against North Korea to ban the import of many more so-called dual-use items, which have commercial purposes but can also be used in conventional, biological, chemical or nuclear weapons. It also gives the committee a green light to designate specific vessels that are breaking sanctions from entering ports all over the world and to work with Interpol to enforce travel bans on North Koreans on the sanctions blacklist. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley, Wright, speaks to South Korean Ambassador to the United Nations Cho Tae-yul before the Security Council vote. The resolution expresses regret at North Korea's massive diversion of its scarce resources toward its development of nuclear weapons and a number of expensive ballistic missile programs, a point stressed by Haley. http:// Daily Mail UK/1/2017/08/05/21/wire1083045150520_634 by 422. It notes UN findings that well over half the population lacks sufficient food and medical care, while a quarter suffers from chronic malnutrition. Though the economic sanctions have teeth, Washington didn't get everything it wanted. http:// Daily Mail UK/1/27/08/23/1083051464178 US_Ambassador_Nikki_Haley_1501970942509 JBG. In early July, Haley told the Security Council that if it was united, the international community could cut off major sources of hard currency to North Korea, restrict oil to its military and weapons programs, increase air and maritime restrictions and hold senior officials accountable. Neither oil nor new air restrictions are included in the resolution. Chinese ambassador to the United Nations Liu Yujie voted for the resolution after a month of negotiations with the US. The measure is not as harsh as the one the US initially sought. North Korea has repeatedly said it will never give up its nuclear arsenal, which it sees as a guarantee of its security. Its adoption follows U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson's comments Wednesday reassuring North Korea that Washington is not seeking regime change or an accelerated reunification of the Korean Peninsula, comments welcomed by China's foreign minister. Tillerson also said the United States wants to talk eventually with North Korea but thinks discussions would not be productive if the Pyongyang comes with the intention of maintaining its nuclear weapons. North Korea has repeatedly said it will never give up its nuclear arsenal, which it sees as a guarantee of its security. The resolution reiterates language from previous ones supporting a return to six-party talks with the goal of denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula, expressing the Security Council's commitment to a peaceful, diplomatic and political solution to the situation, and stressing the importance of maintaining peace and stability in Northeast Asia.